Welcome to Shattering, a program devoted to the most important and fastest growing segment of society. To those who know that the world's political, religious, military, and economic institutions are corrupt, that they have become counterproductive, and that they cannot be fixed. Our mission is to know who is working against our interests, to understand how and why they are doing so, because exposing and condemning such schemes isn't hateful, it's caring. In our concluding hour, we're going to use evidence and reason to explore the conflict between Paul's letters and Yahweh's testimony. Because if you are on one side or the other of this debate, you're either with God or opposed to him. And in the second hour, we're going to continue our series, although I think we'll be a man short today, on sports in the news. Today's subjects will cover everything from Sterling, when we have to look at his deeds versus his words, and his claim of blackmail. Also Jim Brown today just absolutely tore the NCAA apart, which is my least favorite organization, and I think his. As well as the main topic of our discussion today will be the Richie Incognito and Jonathan Martin rift of the Miami Dolphins. Many know that Jonathan Martin withdrew from the team because he said that he was being bullied, and Richie Incognito was suspended from the team because it was deemed that he was a bully and a racist, the provocateur in this case. Anyway, we'll cover those topics and more in our second hour with Aaron today. I think Scott is unavailable. I read today something that was troubling, and I'm going to share the story with you, and then at the end tell you why I think it is troubling. A division within the Department of Defense is investigating whether the digital currency, Bitcoin, is a possible terrorist threat. All right, so there's your clues. A division within the Department of Defense is investigating whether the digital currency, called Bitcoin, is a possible terrorist threat. The Combating Terrorism Technical Support Office, the CTTSO, is spearheading a program that will help the military understand how modern technologies could pose threats to national security, including Bitcoin and other virtual currencies. A memo detailing the CTSO's projects says, quote, "The introduction of virtual currency will likely shape threat finance by increasing the opaqueness, the transactional velocity, and the overall efficiencies of terrorist attacks," as it reported on Bitcoin. One of the greatest concerns reportedly rests with the anonymity afforded Bitcoin transactions. The transactions are public, but the people involved in the operations are unnamed. Bitcoins, according to the business site, can allow illegal operations with the speed of the internet, but with the secrecy of a cash deal. The Treasury Department probe found no evidence of Bitcoin being used to finance terrorism. Well, the government has already conducted the survey, but the anonymous nature of the transaction still has many law enforcement officials worried. All right, let's put the pieces together and talk about why this story is so troubling. First of all, the Department of Defense is being cast in with law enforcement officials. Now, I've said for some time that the Department of Defense is really being positioned today with the American people as its primary foe. That the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense are being amalgamated. That there's going to be very little distinction between the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. between the CIA and the military, between the FBI and the military. And this is an indication of that. America is very rapidly becoming a police state, with the military being deployed on behalf of the police. As a matter of fact, a disproportionate amount of the materials that are being withdrawn now from Afghanistan are being given to law enforcement. A very substantial number of the drones developed for the military are being used by law enforcement. So that's the first concern. The second concern is the Treasury Department has already conducted its investigation. It is a financial arm of the U.S. government, and it found that Bitcoin was not being used to finance terrorism. The Department of Defense now is replicating that same study. Now, the reason that that is troubling is not only is it a complete waste of time, and not only does it put an undue burden on Bitcoin as a competitor to the U.S. dollar, now making them endure another investigation, this time at the hands of the Department of Defense. The United States Department of Defense doesn't even have an accounting system. The U.S. Department of Defense hasn't presented an audited financial statement to the U.S. Congress and to the American people, ever. The Department of Defense has rounding errors in the trillions of dollars. When their books don't balance, they'll just say, oh, I guess we must have $1 trillion of unaccounted inventory over here. We must have spent $1 trillion doing something over there, but we don't quite know what it was. The Department of Defense can't manage its own books. And yet, an aspect of the Department of Defense is going to investigate very sophisticated online electronic transactions? Now, that's stupid. Now, beyond all of that, consider the issue. The United States government doesn't like cash transactions because cash transactions are invisible to the government. They can't control them. They can't tax them effectively, and they can't track them, nor can they interfere with them. You know, you see all the time people wanting to do business in cash because a cash transaction doesn't have the prying and peering eyes of government. That's why the government wants to go to wholly electronic transactions, because they then, by getting into your business, can do everything. They can track your movements, and do. They can track your spending, and do. They can stop your spending, and do. Just as Snowden revealed that the NSA is tracking every phone call that is made in this country, is tracking every keystroke on the internet in this country, I am certain that the NSA is also tracking every credit card swipe in this country. And they want us to go to an all-electronic currency, but they want it to be theirs, so that they can not only track what everyone is doing and deprive people of their privacy, but they can also control individuals, because all they need to do is to put a hold on the bank account and on the credit card, and they do routinely do this. It's how someone who is willing to expose them can be instantly manipulated by them. It is a huge concern. The reason Bitcoin is being attacked in this way, and when the government investigates you, you're being attacked, is because they're a rival. The U.S. government doesn't want a capability that they can't control. And therein is the issue. This is an extremely important story. Gives you an insight into the government's mindset, the fact that police and the military are acting together, that the Department of Defense is attempting to do something to others that it can't do for itself, which is to audit books, and that the Department of Defense wants control over spending. Not government spending, not its spending, your spending. Stories that come along, mostly, just kind of under the radar, I'm going to tell you that this is a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale. This is how the world is going to be manipulated into compliance with the beast. And it is establishing its own turf, and it's not going to allow any rivals. Now, I'm going to speculate here, and I could be wrong. Up to this point, I don't think I have speculated at all. I think I've just made the necessary connections to help all of us understand. But I'm going to speculate. Remember about 3 months ago, there was the big story about how one of the Bitcoin agencies all of a sudden lost, for an unexplained reason, much of its backing. Bitcoin is not a fiat currency. It's an electronic currency, but it's not a fiat currency. It's actually backed by tangible assets. And the tangible assets disappeared. I'm speculating here. But knowing the nature of our government and how unfair they like to play, how the CIA and the FBI and the Treasury, Department of Defense, all do things that, when exposed, we learn are despicable. I wouldn't put it past our government to have been responsible for that theft, for the express purpose of undermining not just a rival, but the single greatest potential threat to America's ability to completely control everyone. When they control electronic currency, they control your movement, your freedom, your privacy, your money. They control everything about you. They can shut everything that you do down, completely isolating you. Welcome back to Shattering. A couple things happened today that affirm something that we have been saying for some time. It might have sounded a bit presumptuous to say that it was Boko Haram, the fundamentalist Islamic terrorist organization, that was responsible for abducting the 230 girls from their classroom in Nigeria. But it was obvious that it was they who took them. And today, the cleric that is the head of the organization said, "I abducted your girls." This is Boko Haram's spiritual leader, Abu Bakr Shikayu. He said this in a video that has been now widely translated. The only question now is what he's going to do next. What we know up to this point is that girls have been tortured and that they have been raped, and that all of them have been told that they will continue to be tortured and raped until they surrender in the sense of submitting to Islam. But the fact remains that even when they submit to Islam, when they convert to Islam, they will continue to be raped. It's just that it won't be called rape, because it will be stated that they are now Muslims and they have married the Islamic terrorist who abducted them, and now it is just sex between a man and a woman. It will continue to be rape. But also there's a new wrinkle You see, the cleric that is in charge of Boko Haram, that means that Western education is sinful, he is now pondering whether or not it is in his terrorist group's best interest. Now, this is a terrorist group that exists for a singular purpose. That is, that they wish to impose Sharia law on the entirety of Nigeria and then on the world. And guided by Sharia law, which is law based upon Muhammad's repulsive life and words, he's trying to decide whether it is a better religious option to sell these girls as kidnapped slaves to the highest bidder, or to simply allow his mujahideen, his jihadists, to continue to molest them. That's a very difficult choice, of course, but that is the one that he is currently pondering. We have Glenn calling in from Philadelphia. How do you like them apples, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm not usually one to advocate military operations of too many sorts, but I would have no problem with multiple nations pooling all of their intelligence and special forces assets to track these bunkers down and terminate them with extreme prejudice.
You know, it is one of the places where if you could isolate them and kill them, you would be doing the world a great service. Now, I'm not an advocate of violence, and I want to tell you that by the fact that we have not sent a cruise missile to thwart these men, when they have killed tens of thousands of Christians, when they have burned thousands of churches and thousands of Christians' homes and Christian businesses, and when they have kidnapped and raped hundreds of little girls. The fact that we haven't sent our cruise missiles or our drones to thwart them, but we're continuing to fly drones over both Yemen and Pakistan to kill individuals who haven't so much as raped anyone, much less killed anyone, tells you where our priorities lie.
Absolutely.
Tells you about our lack of morality, our lack of judgment, and the whole thing is just this pile of lies. The fact is that in Yemen, they're more vocal on the internet, and therefore they're more embarrassing to the administration because they speak of the fact that their antagonism against America is against the cross, and that as fundamentalist Muslims, they need to promote the Islamic war against Christians. And that's embarrassing to the administration, so we go and we fly our drones and kill them, but we don't touch those who actually molest little Christian girls.
I don't care if they're Shintos or Druids. I don't care what stripe they are. Anyone, just if it doesn't inflame one's sense of passion about the protection of innocents across the board, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Now, I am of the conclusion that drones and cruise missiles would be ineffective. We can talk about that in a moment. But there is something about America not wanting to intervene in Africa that's troubling. Welcome back to Shattering News. We're having a conversation with Glenn about the most despicable people on the planet today, the Boko Haram. They not only kill innocent men, women, and children, gunning them down. They are prone to surrounding churches with men, women, and children inside and torching them so that the individuals inside burn to death, and they kidnap little girls and rape them. So as individuals go, they are about as scummy as they get. But of course the problem here is twofold. One is that they're being good Muslims. And no one wants to equate being a good Muslim with such reprehensible behavior. But Muhammad was a kidnapper. Muhammad sold his kidnapped victims. Muhammad raped those that he kidnapped. And so what they're doing here, and Muhammad burned people alive and told Muslims to go burn people alive. Muhammad routinely attacked civilians. In fact, he only attacked civilians, never attacked anyone that wasn't a civilian, killing tens of thousands. So the behavior we're witnessing here is exactly the same behavior as Muhammad. And so now when you condemn it, you're naturally condemning Islam. But I don't think it's possible to prevail against them with cruise missiles and drones and troops or anything else, because I think that when you attack a religious fundamentalist with bullets and bombs, you manufacture 10 to 100 for every one you kill. What do you think, Glenn?
Well, I don't think these guys... This kind of reminds me of the argument that used to be used against capital punishment. You know, people would say it doesn't work. And Mayor Ed Koch ex-Mayor Ed Koch in New York was famously quoted as saying, sure it does, you just don't do it enough and do it consistently. Now in this case, I don't think we're talking about these people as terrorists who are religious ideologues, okay? We're talking about, you know, more criminal mindset that's more akin to Muhammad's original. You know, these guys are probably getting back closer to the origins,
yes,
you know, of the movement than a lot of modern...
That's correct. Yeah, they are good Muslims.
I think they are flying in numbers, and you know, I would have actually, you know, it's funny. Like I said, I'm not usually one to advocate. I don't think going after this. If you don't stand up to people kidnapping, I mean, the numbers are almost kind of staggering. 200 girls, and nobody's out, you know, with sniper rifles picking these guys off. I almost feel like that's the only way to prevail against these guys.
Well, yeah, most of them have actually gone across the borders into Chad and other countries nearby, and so they're not even in Nigeria anymore. But, of course, the difficulty here is that how do you distinguish the Boko Haram members from other Muslims in that region? They're all civilians. They're not wearing badges. They're not wearing uniforms. They're not wearing name tags and saying I'm Boko Haram. There is no way to identify them. So you wouldn't even know who who to kill. I got no issue with when it comes to burning people alive, when it comes to abducting and raping little girls. You know, at that point, my natural inclination, which is against a violent response, to use words to expose and condemn as opposed to violence. Right. I'm gonna throw away my natural inclination to oppose violence, but I still don't know how you apply it in a way that works.
Well, they didn't round up the posse soon enough and go, you know, if they had been able to track them down when they were, you know, in the hinterland immediately after leaving, they'd be like, okay, boys.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
round up the horses.
Right. They're driving a whole fleet of trucks filled with these girls through the streets. They ought to have. You know, if America had used its resources to spy here as opposed to spying on Americans, it would have been easy to track them, and then you would have known who they are. But you know, I'm also a big fan of due process and judicial restraint, in the sense of I would really prefer that people be brought to trial. Because when they're brought to trial, not only now are you acting in a just way and giving, you know, determining who's guilty and who's not, but in a trial, in a public trial of these individuals, the world is going to be exposed to the motivation behind their behavior. And,
absolutely.
And that's really good for people to hear, because it's going to be Islam. So there's so much to be gained if we were to do it the right way. But
well, plus they didn't have the right leadership. See, now they needed a special forces team led by Chuck Norris, Sylvester Stallone, and Charles Bronson. They didn't have the right talent.
Oh, there you go. You know, one of the things too, I would like to compare this to the Ukraine. In the Ukraine, there are some 70 people between the police and the mobster protesters in Kiev that were killed. Some 70 people. Everyone that was killed was either employed as a police officer or they were choosing to be a violent protester. They were all adults. They chose their battleground, and 70 were killed.
Mm-hmm.
And the United States is risking world war, positioning NATO along Russia's borders, tongue-lashing Russia at every opportunity, and we're pushing the world into a war over Ukraine over this. And yet in Nigeria, you've got thousands of innocent people murdered by this fundamentalist Islamic terrorist organization in the most vicious way, and hundreds of little girls kidnapped and raped, and we don't say diddly squat. We don't do anything. Tells me that we have, those people don't matter to America.
Those people aren't living over top of our commodities. These other people are living on top of our commodities.
Well, absolutely not true. Nigeria is a very large exporter of oil, so they are living on top of the commodity of oil. The Ukraine doesn't have very much oil; it's just a pipeline that goes through there. But beyond that, I think that there is a real supremacist issue here. Within the American government, and that's hard to imagine with an African-American president, but America doesn't seem to care about what happens in Africa, and we seem to be overly concerned about what happens in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if that's because, like, white people came from Europe, and they still have the dog, in the fight at some deep-seated, nostalgic.
Yeah, but why not view the world from a blind eye as it relates to race? Wouldn't that be, and make decisions based upon their moral implications and not by race, and therefore be far more concerned about what's happening in Nigeria than we are concerned about what's happening in the Ukraine? Wouldn't that be a moral thing to do?
That would be moral and logically consistent, but why are you expecting those sorts of things?
I'm not. I'm posing the question to expose the hypocrisy and the amoral nature of what's happened to America. This is expressly stated by the realization that the most horrific genocide of the last 25 years occurred in the Sudan, where fundamentalist Arab Muslims first began to hunt and slaughter in genocidal fashion African animists and African Christians, and then they went after African Muslims in the Darfur region of the Sudan. And while they were doing that, America did nothing. And finally, when Muslims were killing Muslims, then you had it become a cause célèbre in the theater arts community, but that was it.
Well, yeah, of course, the average American knows Sue Summers or Curly Sue, but not Sue Dan.
There you go. But that's not good. I mean, this is a serious blight on the world's conscience, and Islam continues to savage little girls, and the world doesn't seem to care. I mean, this is not a problem that's just isolated to Nigeria, where these 230 girls are being constantly tortured and raped by fundamentalist Muslims. But the fact is that 125 million little girls have been sexually mutilated by Muslim parents. I think in terms of just of moral consequence, of moral outrage, it's the single most important negative event in the world today, and no one seems to care about it. In fact, in American universities, if you just try to present the problem, you're banned from even presenting films, documentary, or making speeches about the problem. American universities won't even let you talk about it. I think it's the single greatest scar on mankind's collective consciousness today is the abuse of 125 million little girls.
Of course, American feminists would rather would rather be out defending, the right for and tax funding for transgender operations that will help turn men into women so then they can defend their women's rights than they are about 125 million existing women being mutilated by, a horrific religion.
Here's Obama wanting to send Apache gunships to Egypt when 99% of Egyptians' women claim that they have been sexually harassed on multiple occasions, where 90% of Egypt's women, all of the Muslims, say they were sexually mutilated by their parents, and we're sending them American aid and American weapons. What's wrong with us?
Well, because they see Islam, they want to use Islam. Westerners want to use Islam. They'll buddy up with, especially more with the Sunnis, the oil emirates, the Saudis, and stuff like that, Qatar. And, so if you actually attack something, instrumental like that, it might threaten financial arrangements and political arrangements they have with these people. So.
Can you imagine, though, being so scarred morally that as the President of the United States, you would go into the birthplace of the Muslim Brotherhood in Cairo, Egypt, and speak of the great contributions of Islam to the world, and not mention that in Egypt, Muslim men are responsible for sexually harassing 99% of the women and for sexually mutilating 100% of their own daughters, and you don't even mention this reality, the single greatest moral scar on the world today, and while you're praising Islam, you never once hold them accountable for their abuse of women? It's unconscionable. Shattering this. Dateline Brunei. Brunei has decided to become the first East Asian country to adopt Sharia law, despite widespread condemnation from the international community and human rights groups. The Islamic criminal law is set to include punishments such as flogging, dismemberment, and death by stoning for such crimes such as rape, adultery, and sodomy. By the way, in all of those crimes, you will not see a man dismembered. You will not see a man flogged. You will not see a rapist punished. You will see their victims savaged in this way. During a ceremony Wednesday morning, the Sultan of Brunei announced the commencement of the first phase of Sharia-based penal codes, according to the government's official website. The oil-rich kingdom, located on the island of Borneo, has a population of just 412,000 people. Don't ever go there. The country already follows what this says, a more conservative Islamic rule. I'm not troubled with the term conservative. It's if you were to exchange it to fundamentalist Islamic rule, that would be more accurate, but conservative is not a bad term to use here. Then the neighboring Muslim-dominated countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, and has implemented strict religiously motivated laws, such as banning the sale of alcohol. In response to the new set of laws, human rights groups like Amnesty International say that Sharia will take the country back to the Dark Ages. Now, that's a very strong statement when you realize that Sharia law is comprised entirely by the Hadith and Quran. It's comprised entirely of Muhammad's words and deeds. If Muhammad's words and deeds will take the country back to the Dark Ages, if it will cause the country to treat the victims of rape with flogging and stoning, perhaps, just perhaps, Muhammad wasn't a very good guy. What do you think, Glenn? We have.
I'm here. Yeah, this is interesting because so in Brunei, if you commit rape, your victim gets killed. But if you sip some Chardonnay with your lunch, you're going to get flogged.
That is correct. That is correct. How about that? Welcome to the world of Islam. Oh, and by the way, speaking of hypocritical in Islam, while you cannot drink a Chardonnay at lunch without being flogged, what do you think the rivers flow with in the Islamic paradise? Wine. So here in the Islamic paradise, the rivers flow with wine, and yet here on earth, if a person drinks wine in a country governed by Sharia law, they will be flogged.
Wow.
No hypocrisy there, is there?
Hey, wait a minute. Do they flog the virgins in heaven?
You know, I don't know, but it's kind of interesting, of course, that in heaven, the virgins are for perpetual conquest. That's why after every act of sex, they grow a new hymen and they become subject to conquest all over again. You know, what is the difference between the constant sexual conquest of 72 virgins and rape?
Yeah, exactly. You know, so logically, they would have to be convicted, you know. It seems that the 72 virgins in heaven should be subject to Sharia law and taken to court in heaven.
Oh, absolutely. You would think so, to be fair. And of course, in this whole scenario where if you die killing innocent people on fighting jihad in Allah's cause, that you get these 72 virgins given to you. Why would the virgins even be there? I mean, what is it in this for the virgins? Do the virgins get to go say, hey, you know, I'm a virgin, I want to choose a jihadist, and I want to be one of 72 that he gets to conquest? What is the relationship?
Wait, all this literalization of the 72 virgins, I would point out that they're originally the 5-degree increments of the 360-degree astrological calendar, pagan astrological, and they knew this. So 72 times 5 is 360. So,
okay, there you go. But wouldn't that be hell for the 72 virgins? So if it's hell for the 72 virgins and they outnumber the guys 72 to 1, how could that be paradise? Wouldn't it be hell 72 times over?